a few weeks ago gave a talk to another senior group aging in Montclair about healthy eating during stressful times. And a lot of times what healthy eating means now means doing things that limit your stress, limit your trips to the store, and keep things convenient and safe for you. And that might mean that you're eating more packaged foods than you usually do, and that's perfectly okay. So we're going to be talking today about navigating the emotional side of eating, whether it is during this pandemic or in other stressful times in your life. And we're going to be kind of debunking some of the myths and facts about it. I did want to share first and foremost a little bit about myself before we get started. And I will add that I will be taking questions at the end. So if you have something, jot it down, save it, and we'll definitely be going over it, because I am very notorious for bringing up controversial topics, things that people maybe haven't thought of in that way before. And so if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable or you have a lot of questions about something, that's perfectly okay. I welcome any and all questions, but we will save them for the end. I am a registered dietitian at the Brookdale ShopRite in Bloomfield. I've been there for almost 7 years now, and I have been a dietitian for almost 7 years now. I am also a certified intuitive eating counselor, which I've spoken to this group about in the past, but if you haven't been to those presentations, intuitive eating is all about breaking free of the rules and restrictions and rigidity of dieting and learning how to trust your body again to tell you what you need to eat, how to eat without judgment, without guilt, and without shame. So it is this blend of body and mind connection, and we look at a very holistic form of health. So today you're going to see a lot of the principles of this intuitive eating approach, and you'll start to see a little bit of the background about why I practice the way that I do. I also should say that as a in-store dietitian, I am always here for you as a resource. I will email these slides that I share to Michelle at the end of the presentation or later on today. So you'll have my contact information. The best way to reach me right now is email, because as you can see, sometimes I'm home right now. I'm not in the store every single day, but I am here to answer any questions you have or to help support you on your health journey in any way that I can. So with all that being said, I'm going to start off the presentation, and before we start, I'd like you to take a few moments to sit back and reflect on what does intuitive eating, or what does emotional eating, excuse me, mean to you? What do you feel like constitutes as emotional eating? How does it feel when you feel like you're eating emotionally? What does it feel like physically? What does it feel like emotionally? What are the thoughts that tend to run through your head? So kind of just take a few moments to reflect on your personal version of what emotional eating is. And then as we get started, I'm going to be talking a lot about, first in the beginning, there are some times where we think that we're eating emotionally, and we actually might not be. And we're going to go through a lot of the reasons why something might feel like emotional eating, but it might not be. And what can we do to address those concerns? And then at the end, we'll talk about, okay, if we've stripped away all of those extra things that are not actually emotional eating, we're left with the stuff that is. And I'm going to give you 3 actionable steps that you can take to actually navigate the emotional, like the true emotional eating. All right. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and bring up my PowerPoint slides. All right. So hopefully you guys can see me. If something's wrong, Michelle, if you could just pop on and interrupt, and I'll make sure that I navigate it, but hopefully you can see my slides right now. Come on. There we go. Again, this is just a little bit of an overview about who I am and what I do. We've already addressed kind of thinking about what does emotional eating mean to you, and kind of keep thinking about that. So now let's talk about some of the reasons why people often come to me and say that they think that they're eating emotionally, but they might not be. So before we jump straight to emotional eating, we have to make sure that our body feels safe and nourished. This is really important. The body gets threatened very easily. And if it feels threatened, then there are going to be some survival mechanisms that kick in that are going to feel like you're eating out of control, but they're not actually. There is a quote on the one side of the screen from a fellow dietitian. And she said, which I agree 100% with, that emotional eating in the absence of adequate nutrition. So if we're not getting enough energy, if we're not getting enough food, if we're not getting enough calories, if we're not getting enough different food groups, then it's not actually emotional eating. It is biologically driven eating because of an unmet need. So that means that we are not getting some of our needs met from a biological level. And if you're restricting or dieting, this is the root cause. It may feel emotional. It likely feels emotional and it likely feels out of control, but it's not actually emotional. And so you would be surprised by how many times I have someone who comes to my office and they sit down and they say that they're eating emotionally, especially at the end of the day. They just can't seem to stop snacking at the end of the day. And when we look at it earlier in the day, they're actually under eating without realizing it. And when we start to give more balance and substance earlier in the day, we find that they have a decreased urge to eat at night. So I call this the low-hanging fruit. This is the first thing that we want to address. And in order to address it, we first and foremost want to start tuning into our hunger cues. We have been taught by society, by our culture that we live in, that our body's hunger is not something that we can trust. And so if you've ever heard sayings like, you're probably not hungry, you're just thirsty, try drinking. Or if you've ever heard things like, how could I possibly be hungry? I just ate an hour ago. It's probably just my mind. Chances are that was you teaching your body that you're not going to respond to the cues. And so if we think about it, if I'm sitting here and you're talking to me and I'm on my phone and I'm just sitting here texting going, yep, no, I totally get it. I'm listening. Would you keep talking to me? Probably not, right? Because it's very clear that if I'm sitting here texting someone else, I'm not listening to you. Your body does the same thing. If you consistently ignore what your body is trying to tell you, over time, it will stop talking to you. And so if we're not able to tune into our hunger cues, so if you feel like you don't really feel hungry throughout the day, then you want to make sure that you're at least eating every 3 to 5 hours. So if you find yourself feeling physically hungry more often than every 3 hours, so every 1 or 2 hours you feel like you're hungry, then I want you to listen to your body, because that's your body telling you something, and I want you to eat. But then I also want you to reflect on what your last meal was and decide if it was nourishing enough. A lot of times we eat something that's a little bit more like a snack and we call it a meal. And so we wind up feeling hungry an hour or two later. And so some of the work that I do one-on-one with people is to really look at specifically what you're eating for a meal. And sometimes we just need to bulk it up a little bit. And that helps you go a little bit longer between meals, which is better for our blood sugars. It's better for our metabolism. And it also helps us do things other than think about food all the time, which can be helpful. So if we're eating at least every 3 hours, but then we start going more than 5 hours, and it's been 5 hours since our last meal and we're still not feeling hungry, then I want you to eat anyway. And this is where the tuning into your hunger cues gets a little bit blurry, because if you're not feeling hunger on a regular basis and I tell you to just eat whenever you feel hungry, you might not ever eat. So we have to have a little bit of structure in place. And sometimes the body just needs a little bit of reassurance that it's safe and it's going to get what it needs and that you're going to listen to it. And so when you eat at least every 5 hours, even something small if you need to, if you really have a hard time getting a full meal in, it starts to teach the body that you're listening to it and you're going to give it consistent nourishment. And so if we keep this 3 to 5 hour mark in mind, we can start to adjust our choices to try to get our hunger back in motion. And then the last thing that we want to do is we have to make sure that we're eating enough calories, carbohydrates, fat, and protein. Now, nobody who comes into my office thinks that they're under eating. In fact, most people think that they're overeating, but it's because that we live in this culture that is very steeped in dieting, and we're taught that we're supposed to subsist on next to nothing. So a lot of times I do find that people are not quite eating enough calories, and especially carbohydrates, because people are very afraid of carbohydrates, which is a whole topic for a whole other day. If you have questions at the end, we'll see if we have time to go into it. But you want to make sure that at least in your meals that you're trying to get a combination of carbs, fat, and protein as much as possible, and that you're getting enough total calories, because calories is energy. Our body burns a lot of calories just with our heart beating and our brain firing and all of our body systems moving. So even if we're very sedentary during the pandemic, even if we're not going out and running around and walking and doing all the things we normally do, our body still needs a good amount of calories, and we don't want to be afraid of them. So this is the very first step that we take if we feel like we're eating emotionally. We want to make sure that our body's needs are being met, because if your body's needs aren't being met, it's going to go into survival mode, and it is going to make you feel like you need to eat everything in sight. So it's going to feel emotional. It's going to feel out of control. And if you're not in touch with your hunger cues, you're going to think that your body isn't asking for it. But at the end of the day, it's actually because your body just needs a little bit more substance. So this is the first thing to reflect on. Once we've done that, we have to go to the second step, which is to check any judgments that we have about food. And this is a big one. Because living in the culture that we live in, we tend to judge food a lot. And some of the ways that you might find yourself judging food is if you label foods as good or bad, that's a judgment. If you label foods as some foods being healthy and some foods being junk food, that's also a judgment. If you have cheat foods, if some foods are better than others or worse than others, these are all different ways that we label a food and assign that moral value to it. We'll talk about in a minute why that's problematic. If you avoid keeping certain foods in the house or try to set limits on how much you allow yourself to have, that is also a way of judging food. And what's interesting is that a lot of people who have this mindset, they try to keep foods away because they feel like if they bring it into the house, they're going to eat all of it. They've had a harder time during the pandemic because they've had to stock up on some of these foods because they are the shelf-stable ones, or they're the ones that are available. And it can be really hard to suddenly have these foods all available when in the past you've avoided them. So it can feel like you go out of control with them. And then lastly, if you feel like you are addicted to food or sugar, that is also a very common judgment that I see happening with the people that I work with. So what all of these questions have in common is that they create what's called a scarcity mindset in the brain. Now, scarcity mindset means that your brain thinks that these are in short supply. And when something is scarce or running low, your brain again goes into survival mode, and it says, I have no idea when you're going to let me have these again. So I'm going to try and eat as much of it as possible because this might be the last time in a long time that I get it. And so it sets up this restrict binge cycle where we try really hard to set limits on how much we eat, or we say something is bad, so we judge ourselves for wanting to eat it. And then we get exposed to the food, like we bring it into our house to stock up for the pandemic, and all of a sudden the brain goes, oh my gosh, this is a free-for-all. I need to eat this now because you're never going to let me have it again. And so we go into this binge and we feel like we're overeating, eating emotionally, or out of control. And that reinforces the message for us where we say, geez, I was right. I can't be trusted around this. I have to go back to restricting. And we go around and around and around. The secret to opting out of this vicious cycle is to create an abundance mindset instead. So instead of scarcity, we have to have these foods that we have judgments about, and we have to have them around us regularly. I like to talk about growing up, my friend versus my household. So I lived in the quote unquote junk food house, the one that had all the chips, all the snacks, all the frozen foods, all the everything. My friend, on the other hand, lived in the healthy household. She didn't have any soda. She didn't have any baked goods. Everything was like made from scratch. And when she came over to my house, it was like that girl was never going to eat another bit of food in her life. She stocked up on everything, bowls of everything, eating everything. Now, I certainly enjoyed those foods as well. I had them regularly, but I could take them or leave them, and I didn't feel out of control around them. It's because I was taught an abundance mindset when I was a kid. And so I was able to eat some of these foods, sometimes not be in the mood for them, and it wasn't a big deal. But because she was taught a scarcity mindset, they were special, they were things that she wasn't allowed to have, she tended to go to the other end of the extreme when she was exposed to them. So the process of actually creating an abundance mindset can be really hard work, and it can feel scary. So if I tell you to take every food that you feel uncomfortable around and just buy lots of them and keep them in, that can feel really scary and intimidating. And I don't usually recommend that people do it on their own, but it is something that I work one-on-one with people with, so that we create a very structured and safe process for you to start eating more foods. But in the meantime, just know and get curious about the judgments that you have, because chances are, if you're telling your brain that something is bad or it's limited or you're not allowed to have it, that's all it's going to want. So the first thing that you can do if you don't have access to one-on-one support for this is to create a journal and journal about your thoughts about food. What are your fears? What are you nervous about? Why did you limit it in the first place? And how does it make you feel? And start to really explore, is this true? Is there anybody that might think differently? Do I know anyone in my life who can eat some of these foods without going overboard? And start to just kind of reflect on it. So you can do a lot of self-reflection if you don't feel ready to actually bring these foods in. So this is a really big topic, and putting it all on one slide is not fully doing it justice. So if you do have questions on this one, definitely ask them at the end. I highly expect that people will. But suffice it to say that before we actually label something as emotional eating, if we have been limiting it or telling ourselves that it's bad, there's a good chance that our brain is just eating it because it really wants to get it in while it can. And if we can switch to having these foods be normal parts of our life and nothing special, then our brain might feel a little bit less out of control when we do have it. Okay? So we have our first thing, which is making sure that we are properly nourished. And the second point, which is really getting honest with ourselves about the language that we use when we talk about food and how often we keep these foods around. And if you feel like you've done all of this work and you're still eating emotionally, then I'm going to now walk you through the 3 steps to actually responding to emotional eating. And I want to say that as we go through these 3 steps, it is important that you go in order, which I'll talk about when we actually go through each step. So you want to start with step number 1 and then add step number 2 a little bit later. So our first step is to eat anyway. And everyone tries to resist me on this one. They all want to skip to option 2 or 3. And I'm going to tell you right now that this is the key. This is the secret to everything. Because it's the same thing as that scarcity mindset. If you tell your brain that something is bad or off limits, then eventually you're going to do it. Everyone eats emotionally from time to time. And there are advantages to it, which we'll go over in a second. But by saying that you can't do it, then when you eventually do eat emotionally, you're going to get into that spiral of, this is bad, I can't believe I did this. You're going to start beating yourself up. And if you beat yourself up for it, then you just feel miserable on top of the fact that you were eating emotionally. So we have to suffer twice. Instead, we want to shift to self-compassion, and we really want to give ourselves full permission. And the way we do this is by admitting that there are some advantages to using food for emotional coping. So I'm going to give you a few seconds just to kind of reflect on, what do you think some advantages and disadvantages might be to eating emotionally and giving yourself permission. So just kind of take a few seconds to reflect on it and see. All right, so we're going to start with advantages. And a lot of people struggle with this because we've been conditioned to think that eating emotionally is like the worst thing in the world. So a lot of people have a hard time processing that there are some benefits to it. There are three. One is that it requires no effort. So when we think about a coping mechanism for a stressful situation, it has to have certain characteristics. It has to be easy and accessible. It has to be relatively affordable, and it has to work at least temporarily. If it doesn't meet those three, then it's not a very effective coping mechanism. And so I might say that if I'm feeling super stressed out, it would be really great for me to get a massage instead of turning to ice cream. But during this pandemic, could I get a massage? No. Can I afford to get a massage every single time that I feel stressed out? I would love to. I wish I could, but I cannot. And it's not, and so it might work, but it's not realistic for me to do as a primary coping mechanism. Food, on the other hand, we pretty much always have it available. So no matter when it happens, we usually have some. It is relatively affordable compared to a lot of the other coping strategies that we could use, like, say, an expensive massage or a vacation. And believe it or not, it works. You wouldn't do it if it didn't work. Eating emotionally helps us feel comforted in the moment temporarily, partially because just from an evolutionary perspective, there are hormones that get, and endorphins that get released when we eat specifically carbohydrates. It's an evolutionary mechanism that keeps us eating carbohydrates because we need carbohydrates to survive. So it works because we get those feel-good hormones. It also works because we've been taught for our entire lives that food is comforting. You go to the doctor and you get a shot when you're a kid and they give you a lollipop. You skin your knee when you're running outside as a kid playing, and you get a little extra ice cream. We've been conditioned to associate comfort with food, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So that means that eating in an emotional situation can help you in the moment feel a temporary release from whatever stress is worrying you. And it can make you feel good in the moment. And those are good things. Now, I think the big issue comes when food is our only coping mechanism. The same way that we don't want to have one coping mechanism ever, we want to have a variety of different things. So if food is the thing that we only turn to, then yes, there are some downsides. So some of the disadvantages of eating when you're feeling emotional is that it may actually cause discomfort. So if you eat and you're not hungry and then you fill your body with extra food, you might feel physically overly full, and that's not a comfortable feeling. It can trigger a binge because we could get stuck in this mindset of, well, now I blew it, so I might as well just wait until Monday to start over or do this. And this is the all or nothing thinking that we tend to get caught in. So you want to be very aware if you kind of get victimized or you're a victim to that. Just because you eat emotionally does not mean that you blew it. It means that you're human. And it means that we can choose the next time we eat to do whatever we want. It doesn't mean that we have to go down a I blew it kind of rabbit hole. Your body may store the energy if it's unneeded. I put an asterisk here just because I don't like emphasizing this. Our bodies are very resilient. So if you eat emotionally, even if you eat a very large amount of food once, your body is not going to just automatically gain weight. Our metabolism is pretty resilient, and your body is going to resist weight fluctuations. You might notice if you do weigh yourself, which I don't usually recommend, but if you do get on the scale, you might notice after a big eating period that you are a few pounds up. It is not because you've increased your fat stores. It's because you either have a lot of food in your digestive system that hasn't worked its way out yet, or you have an increase in fluid retention from the actual act of eating and digesting. So that's why I usually don't recommend weighing yourself, because there are so many other variables that go into it. But just know that if you do it consistently, yes, if I go home and I have a very stressful life and I have no coping mechanisms and I'm eating like a gallon of ice cream every day on top of everything else that I'm eating, over time, might that cause my body to store extra? It might over time, but it's not going to happen immediately. It's not going to even happen if you do it every once in a while. And then probably the biggest disadvantage is that eating emotionally does not meet your true needs. If you are feeling lonely, if you are feeling angry, if you are feeling stressed out or bored, eating is not going to fix any of those things. It's only going to temporarily distract you. So there is a risk that if you choose to eat emotionally, when you finish eating, those emotions will come back. So it's not perfect, but it does work in the moment. And we want to remove the judgment around it because we want to recognize that it's perfectly okay. I also want to take a minute to acknowledge that not every instance of emotional eating is negative, because not every emotion is negative. So if you go to your granddaughter's wedding and you don't feel hungry to eat cake, but you eat it anyway because you're celebrating, that's emotional eating. And that's a beautiful thing. Or you go out and you're celebrating, or you have a tradition to make Christmas cookies with your family every December. And you always have a tradition of eating them, and you're bonding with your kids or your grandkids or your friends over them. Social bonding and tradition are big parts of health. And so sometimes eating emotionally in those contexts may actually be health supportive. So we don't want to view it as this big negative thing. The key that I always tell people is that when you recognize that you're eating for a reason other than physical hunger, I want you to say to yourself, I am not physically hungry, but I am choosing to eat anyway. This makes it a choice. And it opens up the conversation that there is a possibility for other choices too. So it makes eating emotionally not a compulsion that we have to do or that we feel out of control of. It's something that we are voluntarily and intentionally allowing ourselves to do. And that mindset shift is very important. So to anyone who wants to skip over this option and go straight to the next ones that I recommend, it's not going to work. I want you to practice doing this for a little bit, and you'll be surprised by the shift that you notice just from giving yourself compassion and permission. So once you have time to practice this out, we can add a second option. Remember that as I add more options, the first one is always still an option. You are always allowed to eat anyway. Option number 2 is going to be distract yourself. This is what we tend to gravitate towards. Lots of people want to just distract themselves. Now, there are some advantages and disadvantages to this option as well. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to kind of reflect on what you think some of the advantages or disadvantages of trying to distract yourself when you're feeling the urge to eat emotionally. All right. So we're going to go through the advantages first. So one of the advantages to distracting yourself is that the urge to eat may pass. If you're just kind of getting this fleeting urge and you kind of go and distract yourself for a little bit, you might actually decide that you don't want to eat and forget about it. It also disrupts the binge eating cycle. So what it does is it drives a wedge between the urge and the response. And that's a really important thing, because when we're caught up in that cycle of restrict and binge over and over and over again, it's very fast, and we don't usually stop to think about anything. It's more we get an urge to do something and we immediately respond. So simply by driving a little wedge, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes or even 1 minute, it can kind of just help you reset and decide if that's what you want to do. We also know that waiting until we're actually physically hungry winds up being more satisfying. So our taste buds are heightened when we are hungry and when our body needs food. So that same cookie often tastes better when we're actually hungry for it. And so some people find that it's helpful to say, you know, I really feel like eating this cookie, but I think I'm going to wait until I'm hungry and I'll have it with my next meal, rather than eating it for an emotional reason when our taste buds are not as sensitive. And then the last advantage is that you may accidentally meet your underlying need. So if you were feeling really lonely and you decided to distract yourself by doing a video call with one of your friends, then you might actually wind up meeting that need of loneliness and you might not feel lonely anymore. So that's a benefit. Now, there are some disadvantages. This requires thought and effort as well as preparation. So you have to disrupt that urge to just turn immediately to food. And that takes extra effort, which is harder to do. You also probably want to keep some things like a distraction drawer or a list of things that you can do. I will actually send out a handout that I have called 101 Things to Do Besides Eat. So that you have that as well. You can pull from it and get some inspiration there. But you want to know in advance what are some things to do. It is still also just a temporary solution, and it may not meet your underlying needs. So if I'm feeling bored and I want to eat because I'm just feeling bored, that's an emotion. And then I decide to try and do my taxes. Is that going to help me in the long run? I'm probably going to feel just as bored by the time I'm done. Unless I really like doing my taxes. Maybe we have some accountants in the group. Awesome. I'm not one of those people. So you want to know, I also know that if I'm feeling anxious, then turning to some of my family members may actually increase my anxiety instead of decrease it. So learning what may or may not be a trigger for you is helpful. So if we just randomly choose a distraction without any thought into why we're eating emotionally, we may accidentally make it worse or not make it better. Usually what I tell people when they're distracting themselves is to, in the beginning, count to 10. I'm not telling you to automatically just go to a 15-minute distraction. Count to 10. Now, chances are at the end of 10 seconds, you're still going to want to eat emotionally. That's not very much time. You're probably not going to forget about the food in that period of time. But it helps warm up your muscle and helps you drive that wedge between the urge and the response. So you start with 10 seconds, then you move up to 30 seconds, move up to 1 or 2 minutes, and you slowly, gradually increase it. And if at any point you get to the end of your timer and you still want to eat, cool. You go back to option 1 and you give yourself permission to eat anyway. But you might find that more often than not, you slowly start to lose the interest in the food itself. So that's option number 2. Our last and final option is to meet our true needs. It is to figure out what emotion we are feeling, why we are feeling it, and what our body is actually asking us for, because it's not asking us for food. There are also advantages and disadvantages to this. So I'm going to do my little 10-second pause, let you guys think about what some advantages of this could be, especially based on what we've talked about before, and what are some disadvantages. Because again, no coping mechanism is perfect. So there are going to be advantages and disadvantages to this one as well. So give it a few seconds, think it over. Okay. So the advantages of meeting your true needs. This actually decreases urges and triggers. So if your body is feeling an emotion and it's turning to food as a response, and you teach it to respond in a different way, over time you will actually get fewer urges to eat emotionally. it tends to improve our overall well-being because we are developing positive coping mechanisms to our stressors in life. It builds new skills for coping with life. And like I said in the first part of this, any one coping mechanism is going to be problematic if we use it all the time. So we want to have lots of different options for when things get stressful or emotional or hard, so that we can choose the one that works for us in that moment. This is the one that leads to the best long-term results, hands down. So it sounds pretty awesome, right? But it's still going to have some drawbacks. Namely, it is by far the hardest of all of them to do. It requires more time, it requires more energy, it requires more effort. So it's great that you can build new skills, but building new skills is hard. And it's really, really challenging to do. So it requires that you really take time to do that. And it may require you to ask for help and to be open and honest with yourself and others, because this is very difficult to do on your own. It is possible, but you may need to read a lot of books. You may need to seek the support of a therapist. You may need to work with like a dietitian like myself that's trained in intuitive eating. And even in some cases, there's going to be a therapy line that I can't cross, and an actual mental health counselor will be your best bet for that. So this is definitely not easy to do, but it is very helpful. And I'm going to walk you through a few things that you can reflect on for this last one. So if we're going to meet our true needs, we have to understand what our needs are. This is probably a little bit small for you to see, but it's called an emotion wheel. Now, you'll get a copy of this so you can like zoom in if you can't see all of the different words. But in the center, we have our core higher level emotions. And it's things like happy and bad and angry and fearful. We tend to live in that center circle. We tend to describe our emotions in a very limited way. Our vocabulary is not very robust. And what that means is that it's not very specific about what's really going on. So if you're feeling sad, you can ask yourself, am I feeling lonely, or am I feeling guilty, or am I feeling hurt? Those are all very different emotions. If you decide that you're feeling, let's say, guilty, do you feel ashamed or do you feel remorseful? If you're feeling depressed, are you feeling empty or are you feeling inferior? Those are very different feelings, even though they come from the same root. And so the more specific we can get about understanding what it is we're actually feeling, the more capable we will be at actually responding to those emotions. Now, unpacking these emotions is hard to do. So you'll see in my next slide, I constantly recommend working with a therapist as you start really unpacking emotions. Because if you notice really, really intense emotions coming up that you're having a hard time unpacking on your own, then someone who's specifically trained in therapy is a really supportive person to have on your team to help you with that. I am a big proponent of therapy. I have been in therapy myself for years. I'm actually going to grad school to become a therapist in addition to being a dietitian. So I really strongly believe in the benefits of both, and they can be helpful. So once you figure out what you're feeling right now, you want to just very high level surface ask yourself, is this feeling pleasant? Is it neutral? Or is it unpleasant? Sometimes if it's a really, really strong emotion, it might be hard to sit with it. So just recognizing whether it's pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant can be a helpful step. You can also try to zero in on where in your body do you feel the sensation of this emotion. Every single emotion has a home in the body. There are some similarities from person to person, but it can be individual. For example, if you're feeling nervous, you might feel it in the pit of your stomach. If you're feeling anxious, some people feel a tightness in their chest. If you're feeling angry, you might feel tension in your arms or body. And so by getting out of your own head and into your body, we can start to recognize that these emotions are just physical sensations, and then the thoughts that we attach to them. So when we're feeling a very negative emotion, we are often feeling something physical and then telling ourselves a story about it. And it's that story that tends to get us spiraling down into a black hole of concern and worry and stress. Whereas if we can kind of shut off our brains for a minute and just feel what's happening in our body, we can recognize that we can sit with that discomfort and that it's okay. It is okay to have negative emotions. That's going to happen. It's part of being human. It's part of life. So if we can learn to just kind of like observe it, it's a form of meditation to just kind of sit and feel into it. And when you're feeling this, you can also ask yourself, what do you need right now related to that feeling? So what is the need that isn't being met? And how can you meet that need? If you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling isolated, if you're feeling angry, if you're feeling like you're not being heard, like no one's taking you seriously, those are all different emotions. And you can figure out how you need to change what you're doing, how you're communicating, or how you're thinking about a situation to meet that underlying need. And again, like I said, working with a therapist to unpack these further is really important, because there is only so much that we can do when we're in it. We're living our lives. Sometimes it's helpful to have someone from the outside look in and offer a different perspective. So there is never any shame in getting help for this. A therapist is a wonderful person to just be there for you and support you and offer you new perspectives. So these are some questions that you can use if you're feeling like you're using food emotionally and you want to get to the root of the issue. But remember at the end of the day that it's still okay to eat emotionally. And even if we have a lot of tools in our coping mechanism chest, we will always turn to food sometimes. And that's okay. So I've been talking a lot, and I'm going to open it up now to see if we have, with our last like 15 minutes or so, if we have any questions. So I'm going to stop my screen share, and we can do questions in a few ways. Actually, I'm going to share my screen again because I'm going to show you. Let me exit out of that. So can you guys, I don't know if you don't see my participants. This might not actually work. I've never shared my screen for that. Okay, so at the bottom of the screen, there's usually a list of participants. And if you click on that, you can see your name and you can usually raise your hand from there. But if not, you can also type your question into the chat box and we can go from there. So I do have a question in the chat box, so I'll start with those. And the question is, what do you think of the Weight Watchers plan? So a Weight Watchers plan is ultimately a diet. So Weight Watchers is telling you how much and what you need to be eating, which means that it's taking your autonomy away, and it's not teaching you to listen to yourself. Ultimately, what I find with people is, so say you're given a certain amount of points and you get to the end of the day and you ran out of points, but you're starving. What do? Chances are you would probably, I know they have a lot of like no point foods now, so you would turn to those, but what does that do? The no point foods are all things like fruits and veggies and things like that, which is another way of saying that some foods are good and some foods are bad. And when we create that hierarchy of foods, that good versus bad, we set our brains up to be in that scarcity mindset. It's also really just, it's very tiring to be counting points all the time. And that's usually what people who work with me say, that they're just kind of tired of counting all the time and tired of thinking about food all the time. And they just want to be able to eat without thinking about it and overthinking about it. And so I certainly don't blame anyone for being drawn to Weight Watchers. I certainly don't blame anyone if they like it. At the end of the day, you get to live your life and you get to choose whatever you want to do with your body. And if you like Weight Watchers, you get to keep doing Weight Watchers. But from what I've seen with my clients and from the research, it's something that I do have concerns about. I also know that from their press releases, the reason that they've recently changed is because a lot of people don't want to be on a diet anymore. They want like the lifestyle change. And so in their press release, they came out and literally said that this is our challenge, to stay relevant and cultivate the next generation of dieters. Plans like Weight Watchers don't want you to find a solution that works. They want you to be lifelong subscribers. And if it's something that you're on for the rest of your life, and as soon as you stop, it stops working, that means that it's not really teaching you how to take care of yourself from an individual level. It means that they're just profiting off of keeping you hooked on it. And I have an issue with companies that aren't teaching you lasting change. My goal is that you never need me again, except for maybe a quick question here or there. When I work with you one-on-one, my goal is to get you out of my one-on-one services because I have taught you all of the foundation that you need, and you don't need to rely on me anymore. So those are my big concerns. I definitely don't want to come off like I'm attacking Weight Watchers, which I may have. Again, at the end of the day, everybody's different, but really reflect on whether this is sustainable for you, whether it's allowing you to connect back to what you need as an individual, and how it makes you feel. From my perspective, from my experience, it hasn't really helped people navigate emotional eating, and it has gotten very tiring to people over time. So I usually offer a different way. I hope that answered your question. If you have a follow-up question or if you have other questions, feel free to send them through. What about Noom? Excellent question. Guess what? It's also a diet. I've been hearing a lot about Noom, and the concern, so we now live in a society that is steeped in wellness culture. Wellness has become like this superiority thing where if you're focusing on your health, you're kind of inherently praisable or better than if you're not, which is a little bit problematic. Noom sells itself as a lifestyle change. They talk about the psychology behind the eating and everything like that. And they even throw out phrases like intuitive eating. But ultimately, if it is with the sheer focus of changing your body size, it is still a diet, and it is still going to be restrictive in some capacity. Our bodies know what size they want to be. It might not be the size we want them to be all the time, but they know. And if we focus on taking care of ourselves and listening to ourselves and focusing on holistic health that also addresses satisfaction and pleasure and socialization and bonding and stress and all of these things, if we really take care of ourselves, our bodies are going to settle into whatever size they're meant to be without us having to micromanage it. There's a very difficult concept for a lot of us to come around to because we've been taught that we need to control our body size all the time. But ultimately, although Noom does use some psychology principles and they use like cognitive behavioral therapy, and they advertise themselves as not being a diet, they're still specifically trying to have you change your body size rather than focusing on taking care of yourself and trusting that your body will fall into whatever place it's meant to be. So I still have the same concerns as Noom that I have with Weight Watchers, although I know the way that they advertise. So again, hopefully that answers the question. And hopefully this doesn't come off as like me bashing every diet out there. I have very strong opinions, but again, remember, I understand if you like that and you're allowed to disagree with me, you're allowed to say, hey, I'm going to keep doing this because this is what feels right to me. I'm more here for the people who feel like they maybe are looking for a different way, and I offer you that through intuitive eating, if that makes sense. Does anyone have any other questions or follow-up questions to those? Can anyone take advantage of my services through ShopRite? If yes, how does one get an appointment with you? Yes and no. So my services are 100% free. Anyone can see me. The issue is that I have a waiting list that I've also capped because of everything going on. So I continue to see during this pandemic my current clients from ShopRite using phone consultations. But if you've ever seen my office, we can't get 6 feet between us. It's a very small office, so no one can come in person right now. And I'm not offering initial consultations for new people until I can do video calls, and I'm still trying to get the final approvals for that. So as of right now, I'm not taking on new people. I am really, really hoping to be able to do that over the next few weeks or month. Your best bet would be to shoot me an email. Again, my email address will be on the slides when I email those out, and let me know that you're interested in, and I can try and keep you updated on when I'm able to get people onto that list. I can also say, if you're interested in the meantime in learning more about this approach, there is a book called Intuitive Eating. It is by, I'll type it in the chat box too, so you have it. It is by Evelyn Tribbley and Elise Resch. They are both dietitians, and they created Intuitive Eating. The newest edition of their book is coming out next week. And so I've spoken to Evelyn Tribbley herself about it, and I'm really excited for the changes they're making. I highly recommend pre-ordering that version, although you can get older versions in like libraries and things like that. So that's a really good like intro to this concept if you can't see me one-on-one, but you want to learn more about it. And Michelle just said to anyone who wants this presentation, please email her. She left her email address, and she'll send it to you when I send it to her. So like I said, I have to run after this out to, I have a doctor's appointment I have to go to, but this afternoon when I come back in, I will make sure that I get all of the slides and documents over to Michelle. And so if you're interested, make sure to let her know. Does anyone have any last minute questions?
If people feel, if they're having trouble with the chat, if you can unmute yourself,
Yep.
you can ask a question out loud if that's easier for you, because I know some people have trouble with chat. Does anybody want to unmute yourself? I see Patricia.
No, it's Patty. I'm just listening.
Oh, okay. Okay. If you want to unmute yourself to ask a question, here's your last chance. Anybody?
The chart, the wheel that you had.
The emotion wheel.
With all the emotions on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important. I would definitely appreciate if you would can put that in your information you send out.
Absolutely.
And
that will 100%.
I come to the ShopRite. Well, I used to come to ShopRite probably 5 days a week. Now I try to only come 1 day a week.
Good.
But it's
Good.
very civilized. And Michelle, I don't know about you. I think you live in Bloomfield, but the ShopRite is very civilized right now. So I think the bus going over there for the seniors probably would be okay. Because I say they not that many people are there at a time. People abide by the lines, which aisle to go. Now, the guys are the worst. The guys that go. You know. I said, "Sir, you're going the wrong way." Oh, am I? Oh, I'm sorry. So anyway, but I've seen you over there, and I'm going to call Neil. You know who Neil is?
Yeah.
He owns the store, Michelle.
It's the big kahuna.
I'm calling him up and telling him, what do you need? You need video, right? For your clients. Is that what you
yes,
need?
I do.
Don't worry, I'm calling him right now.
Okay.
I
appreciate it.
Thanks, Linda.
Excellent. So we can get all of you guys in to see me as soon as possible.
Listen, we're going to be in this boat for quite a while, I think.
Yes.
And you got to get video. And all the money I've given to the ShopRite in 53 years, 53 years I've been a customer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Your name again?
Jessica.
I'm getting a video, Jessica.
All right.
Thank you.
I also want to mention to everybody that we are talking about, you know, when Easy Ride starts rolling again, you know, really implementing safe distancing on the bus, maybe increasing the amount of times that they go to ShopRite so that we can have less people on the bus at one time, because we know that's really important. And also maybe doing another training. I know it's kind of weird to use technology to talk about technology, but if Jessica or somebody from your store would do a Zoom call about how to shop from home, and I think it would be a great time to just schedule one of those. So is that you or somebody from your store, somebody else?
I have to get approval for it and talk about whether it's me or not, but it's definitely something we can work out.
You did that live at Edgemont, and I think it's really important for people to feel comfortable with it. And like my parents, I showed them how to do it, and that's how they're shopping now. They pick it up, they order it online, they pick it up at the window and or at the door, the side door, and it's been fabulous for them, a real lifesaver. And then you feel like you have some control, you know, and you know, you can eat you know, as healthy as you want to eat.
Exactly.
Michelle, I'd like to add to that. It's
Sure.
been a lifesaver for us, and everybody has been so kind and so wonderful. If I have a question or a problem, I call the ladies there, Tony. They answer my questions. They help me out. We would not have survived without ShopRite's Shop from Home.
Yeah.
And
I will pass that
amazing.
feedback along too. We appreciate hearing that. All right. Well, thank you guys
All right,
so
so
much for coming.
If you have, if you would like this presentation, Jessica's going to send it to me, right, Jessica? And then I will forward it to anybody who emails me. That, you know, if you want it, just email me and I'll send it out. I'll forward it to you, okay? And that wheel is in that presentation, so you'll get that.
Yeah. And I'm also typing in just now my email address really quickly. So if anyone does need to email me or wants to get in touch with me, it's right there. So you have that as well.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Bye.